Why does the sky feel different lately, even on the nights when nothing unusual is technically happening up there? You've noticed it. Maybe you haven't said it out loud to anyone, because saying it out loud invites a look you'd rather avoid from people who haven't felt it too. But something in the way the stars sit tonight isn't the same as it was even 2 years ago. And you know it in a place words don't usually reach first. This isn't about telescopes, and it isn't about anything you'd find explained cleanly on the news. It's quieter than that, and stranger, and it shows up in moments that have nothing to do with astronomy at all. A song comes on and your whole chest tightens for no clear reason. A stranger looks at you a beat too long on the street, and something passes between you that neither of you asked for. You wake at exactly the same hour, night after night, as if someone or something were checking in. Here's the pattern almost nobody names correctly, because naming it honestly requires admitting something uncomfortable first. You've been treating these moments as noise, random, meaningless, easily explained by stress or poor sleep or simply getting older. But noise doesn't usually arrive with this much precision, this much repetition, this much quiet insistence on being noticed rather than dismissed. Think about how many people you personally know who've mentioned, almost in passing, that something feels different lately. Not dramatic, not a crisis, just different, in a way they can't quite pin down, in a way that makes them stop mid-sentence sometimes and just look somewhere far away for a second. That's not one person's imagination running loose. That's a shared signal, arriving through separate lives that were never coordinated with each other. You've felt time move strangely too, haven't you? Some days stretch impossibly long, and others vanish before you've even registered they started. Calendars still work the same way they always have, on paper, but something underneath the measured hours has started behaving differently, and your body clocked it long before your mind found a way to explain it away. Here's the first real crack in what you've probably assumed about all of this. This isn't a message beamed down from somewhere impossibly far away, arriving to interrupt your ordinary Tuesday with something dramatic. It never worked that way, and treating it that way is exactly why so many people miss what's actually happening right in front of them. What's shifting isn't arriving. It's already here, and it has been for longer than you'd expect, moving through attention rather than through distance. Certain traditions describe an ancient intelligence connected to a specific star cluster, one associated with clarity, with heart-centered perception, with a kind of contact that doesn't require spacecraft or dramatic sightings at all. Whatever name feels right to you for that presence, the function described across very different sources stays oddly consistent. Not rescue, not intervention from outside your life. A tuning happening quietly, inside the exact attention you're using right now to listen to this. Listen. That claim deserves real scrutiny, not blind acceptance, and it deserves that scrutiny before you decide what to actually do with it tonight. But scrutiny isn't the same as dismissal either, especially when the description lines up so precisely with something you've already sensed privately, on nights you couldn't quite explain to the people around you. Here's the part almost nobody names correctly when they talk about this kind of contact. It was never really about proof, about sightings, about something appearing dramatically enough to convince a skeptical mind once and for all. Proof was never really the goal here. The actual mechanism operates in something quieter: perception, willingness, the specific quality of attention you bring to an ordinary evening like this one. And that mechanism doesn't wait for your permission before it starts working on you. You're already responding to it right now, in this exact moment, whether you've named it consciously or not. Reaching for a rational explanation instead of sitting with what's actually stirring underneath the surface of tonight. Here's where this needs to slow down, because the instinct to look outward towards some distant cluster of stars, toward beings entirely separate from your own daily life, misses the actual location of what's being described. This doesn't begin light years away, waiting to arrive and change everything for you. It begins inside your own attention, in the moment you decide whether tonight's strange feeling gets a name or gets dismissed. What people call contact is, underneath the language, simply perception, finally letting in something it spent years agreeing to filter out automatically. Without noticing that shift, the whole subject stays distant, abstract, something happening near stars instead of something happening through the quality of your own noticing. I put something together for exactly the moment you're in tonight. And I want to be honest with you about why it matters right now, specifically to you. What you've been sensing isn't random static, and it isn't simply exhaustion catching up with you. It's the early edge of a recognition that something has been reaching toward your attention for longer than you've had language to describe it. I invite you to download the digital book I prepared for you, The Great Spiritual Game Hidden Behind Your Consciousness, because this video can point toward that recognition, but it can't walk you through the entire structure sitting behind it. Inside those pages, the connection between this ancient presence and your own perception gets laid out clearly. What's actually shifting inside you, why it's intensifying now, and what it's quietly asking of you as someone already inside the pattern, not watching it from a distance. This isn't speculation dressed up as certainty, and it isn't another list of predictions to wait on anxiously. It's a map built for people who sense correctly that something larger is moving and want the structure underneath the feeling, not just another headline confirming it exists. The link is waiting in the first pinned comment below this video, ready whenever you decide to look. Read it slowly, without rushing toward conclusions, and notice which lines feel less like new information and more like something you already suspected quietly, alone, long before tonight ever gave it words. You close that thought for now, but something in you doesn't fully close with it. It stays half open, waiting. The way a door left slightly ajar changes the temperature of an entire room. Because once you allow yourself to consider that this contact might already be happening through perception rather than distance, a sharper question follows right behind it. If it's already here, why does some part of you keep quietly refusing to let it fully land? Here's where the pattern gets personal faster than most people expect it to. You feel that strange tightening in your chest during a quiet moment, and within seconds, you've already labeled it anxiety, hunger, tiredness. Anything with a familiar name attached to it. That labeling feels like self-awareness. It isn't. It's a rehearsed exit, so practiced it no longer even registers as a choice you're making in real time. You tell yourself you're being sensible by not reading too much into a strange coincidence, a repeated number, a dream that felt more vivid than dreams usually do. Sometimes that's genuinely wise, and sometimes underneath that reasonable-sounding caution, there's simply fear, wearing the exact costume of good judgment so convincingly you don't question it. Listen. Discernment and dismissal can look nearly identical from the inside, but only one of them actually keeps you exactly where you've always stood. Real discernment stays open long enough to examine something honestly before deciding. Dismissal closes the door before examination even begins, then congratulates itself quietly for staying so grounded about nothing shifting at all. Pause here for a second. Notice your jaw. Is it soft or is it held tight, bracing against something that hasn't even fully arrived yet tonight? That bracing isn't random. It's a decision your nervous system made a long time ago. And it's still running quietly, still active, right now while you sit here listening to this. This is the mechanism almost nobody names correctly when they talk about resisting contact of any kind. The mind doesn't reject this because it's foolish or closed. It rejects it because somewhere earlier an idea this large once felt disorienting. even threatening to whatever sense of control you'd built, and no update was ever issued to say that threat had passed. Think about the first time you ever heard something like what's being described tonight, years ago, maybe from a book, maybe from someone you half trusted at the time. What did you actually do with it? Most people laugh, reflexively, before the sentence even finishes landing fully. That laugh isn't always mockery. Sometimes it's the fastest exit available from a feeling too vast to hold comfortably in that particular instant. You've done this yourself somewhere, at some point. Waving away a signal too quickly, not because you examined it honestly and found it lacking, but because waving it away felt safer than sitting with the uncertainty of not knowing yet. That isn't a flaw worth punishing. It's a mechanism, and mechanisms can be studied calmly without turning the study into self-judgment. If you're still here, past the point where the easy jokes usually take over completely, that isn't nothing. Something in you already suspects there's more worth examining here than a quick dismissal would allow. And that suspicion is exactly the beginning of what this entire conversation keeps circling back toward. Let's go deeper into how this resistance actually operates, because the surface behavior, the joke, the quick relabeling, the fast change of subject, is only the visible edge of it. Underneath, there's a quieter calculation running constantly. If I take this seriously and I'm wrong, I'll feel foolish in front of people whose opinion I value. If I take it seriously and I'm right, everything I thought was stable just shifted beneath me. Either way, the mind flags it as risk, and risk gets minimized by default, long before curiosity ever gets a genuine vote. So you stay in the comfortable middle ground, interested enough to keep watching videos like this one, late at night when no one else is around to witness the interest, cautious enough to never quite let it change how you actually move through an ordinary Tuesday. That middle ground feels safe. It also guarantees nothing ever really shifts, no matter how many hours you spend absorbing information that never gets permission to land anywhere real inside you. Here's where the difference between healthy discernment and control disguised as wisdom becomes worth naming clearly. Once you actually look at it directly, discernment asks careful, honest questions and still moves forward when something rings true. Control disguised as discernment asks the same questions endlessly, using each one as a fresh excuse to postpone any real movement whatsoever. You've likely met both versions somewhere in your own circle of friends. The one who questions an idea and still stays genuinely curious about where it might lead, versus the one who questions everything reflexively, using skepticism as a permanent wall instead of a temporary filter to sort through. One sharpens understanding over time. The other simply protects the same unchanged position indefinitely, dressed up convincingly as intellectual rigor. Notice what's happening in you right now, in this exact instant, while you're weighing how seriously to take everything said so far tonight. Some part of you is already deciding quietly whether to let this actually mean something real or to file it away later as interesting content and move on completely unchanged. That decision, made in the space of a few seconds, is itself the entire mechanism this section has been describing, happening live, inside you, as you listen right now. Here's an uncomfortable truth worth sitting with instead of deflecting it immediately tonight. This resistance isn't happening to you from some outside force keeping you deliberately unaware. It's a loop running in your own attention, reinforced every single time curiosity gets quietly overridden by the comfort of staying exactly where you already are. Think about the last strange, unexplainable moment that actually reached you fully instead of sliding past unexamined. Did it stay with you for hours afterward, working on something underneath conscious thought? Or did you manage to distract it away within minutes of it happening? That answer tells you more about your actual relationship to this contact than any belief you'd state out loud to someone else. This is where the ground shifts again, so stay with it a little longer tonight. You don't need more evidence of strange occurrences. You've likely already collected more than enough over the years to fill several conversations you've never actually had with anyone. What's missing isn't proof. What's missing is permission, granted from somewhere deeper than curiosity alone, to actually let what you already sense be true. And here's a question worth holding in silence, rather than rushing to answer out loud immediately tonight. If everything described here turned out to be accurate, if this presence really has been tuning your attention for longer than you realized, would the version of you sitting here right now know what to actually do with that recognition? Or would some old, practiced discomfort quietly shrink it back down to something manageable enough to forget by morning? That discomfort has a name, and it isn't confusion, and it isn't foolishness either. It's the friction between the scale of what's actually being described and the identity you've built around staying small enough to remain comfortable inside a familiar, explainable version of your own life. If you've made it this far, past every reflex built to turn you away early tonight, that isn't accidental in the slightest. Not everyone stays present for the part where the language stops offering easy comfort and starts asking something real of you instead. And if this is still landing clearly, you're already standing somewhere different from where most viewers give up and quietly scroll away. That's where this goes next. Not into more strange occurrences to catalog nervously. Not into another list of signs to watch for obsessively. Into the deeper structure underneath all of it. Who you've quietly decided you're allowed to become. Once contact stops feeling like something arriving from outside and starts feeling like something already living inside your own perception. Who you're allowed to become in relation to this contact isn't decided by how many strange occurrences you've collected over the years. It's decided by something quieter, something that operates whether the signs are loud or barely perceptible at all. Call it the ceiling you've placed without ever consciously choosing it over what feels possible for someone exactly like you. Here's the simplest way to describe it, stripped of anything overly mystical. Identity is just the story your mind keeps repeating about who you are, so consistently in so many ordinary moments that it stopped sounding like a story and became something you mistake for settled fact. Facts don't get questioned. They just get lived inside, quietly, day after unremarkable day. This is exactly where wanting contact and believing you're actually capable of receiving it split apart from each other, even though most people treat those two things as the same thing entirely. You can want this connection with your whole chest and still not believe underneath that wanting that it was ever really meant for someone like you specifically. Desire lives in imagination. Identity lives somewhere older, somewhere imagination has to request entry before anything real is granted. Think about the people who seem to receive these signals with unusual clarity, almost effortlessly, while others study the exact same phenomena for years and never quite feel anything shift. It was never really about sensitivity or luck or some special gift handed to a select few at birth. It was about which of them had already decided, somewhere below conscious thought, that receiving belonged inside their identity rather than remaining outside it, waiting to be earned through more study. Listen, hoping you might one day sense something real and expecting that connection as simply part of who you already are. Those are not the same internal posture, even though they sound nearly identical spoken aloud. Hope reaches toward an outcome that might or might not arrive, negotiating constantly with doubt along the way. Expectation already lives inside the outcome, calm, almost bored by its own certainty, unmoved by whatever noise tries to shake it loose. Here's a small, ordinary example, because this pattern hides best in ordinary moments, rather than dramatic ones. Someone mentions, almost in passing, that you seem unusually perceptive, like you notice things other people miss entirely. Watch what happens in the half second before you respond to that. Some people simply receive the observation. Others deflect it instantly, insisting they are not special at all, as if perceptiveness itself needed defending against. That reflex isn't humility, it's identity, quietly protecting its current shape against information that doesn't match the file it's already holding about who you're supposed to be. You've done this yourself, somewhere, in some area of your life, likely without even noticing it happening in real time as it occurred. It isn't a flaw worth punishing yourself over tonight. It's a mechanism, and mechanisms can be studied calmly, the same way you'd study a pattern showing up in someone else's life rather than your own. The mind isn't sabotaging you here. It's staying coherent because holding two contradictory ideas about your own capacity creates a specific uncomfortable friction. Most people will do almost anything to avoid feeling directly. That friction shows up right after something unusually clear happens to you. A moment of recognition that arrived faster than doubt could catch up to it. Instead of trusting it, there's often a flicker of suspicion, as if clarity itself was somehow too easy to be legitimate. That flicker is coherence, quietly pulling you back toward the story it already believes is true about your actual capacity to receive. Pause here for a moment. Notice your breathing and let it slow down just slightly. Ask yourself honestly, when a moment of connection arrives easily, do you trust it, or do you brace for the doubt that surely has to be coming to correct it? That bracing isn't wisdom, even though it's remarkably good at wearing wisdom's expression convincingly. Here's the part that tends to reorganize everything once it's actually understood clearly tonight. This contact isn't only responding to how open-minded you claim to be, it's responding to what feels familiar to you personally. And for most people, receptivity and familiarity have almost nothing to do with each other yet, which is exactly why so few ever notice the gap directly. If you've stayed with this past, the point where distraction usually wins. Some part of you already suspected this before tonight, gave it clear language to hold on to. That isn't coincidence. It's what happens when something true meets a mind that was already circling this exact question quietly, alone, long before finding words for it here, tonight. Let's go further, because identity isn't only belief. It's rehearsed familiarity, built through repetition, until it feels less like a choice and more like whether you've simply learned to live inside without questioning. You didn't decide once, cleanly, that this kind of contact wasn't meant for someone like you. You lived through enough ordinary moments where nothing seemed to happen that your system quietly filed the absence as reliable, something expected rather than something worth re-examining. This is why simply wanting to be more open rarely holds for very long under real testing. Wanting operates in the conscious mind, the newest, most recent layer of the whole system. Identity operates underneath it, older, faster, largely indifferent to whatever your conscious mind has recently decided it wants to believe about itself tonight. Here's where all of this starts to reshape how you understand everything discussed so far. It was never only about detecting signals accurately from the outside, waiting patiently for proof strong enough to convince you completely. It's about which version of yourself your system has quietly filed as familiar enough to actually receive. Because familiar is what gets reinforced, regardless of how much you consciously want to feel differently in the meantime. This is exactly why some people can read every account, study every description, and still feel nothing shift internally, no matter how convinced their intellect becomes. The information was never the problem. The mismatch between information and identity was. You can believe the facts thoroughly and still meet them from an identity that was never updated to hold what genuine receiving actually requires of you. Real change here doesn't begin with consuming more accounts, more descriptions, more convincing arguments about why this is real. It begins with smaller, stranger moments. Noticing the flicker of suspicion when clarity arrives too easily. Noticing the reflex to deflect your own perceptiveness. Noticing the quiet discomfort right before you're about to trust something you've spent years dismissing instead. Not everyone catches this the first time it's said plainly tonight. Most people hear, "Your identity decides what you can receive," and nod along, then return to searching for more external proof, waiting for the universe to hand them permission to feel differently about themselves. If something in you just sat up a little straighter at that sentence, that reaction alone puts you somewhere different from where most viewers are still sitting right now. Here's something worth being honest with you about, because pretending otherwise would waste both of our time tonight. A single video, however clear, can describe the shape of this contact. It cannot walk you through the actual patient work of rebuilding an identity capable of holding it fully. That work has sequence. It has structure. It has specific ways of recognizing familiarity before it hardens back into fact. And I built exactly that inside the great spiritual game hidden behind your consciousness. I invite you to download that digital book now. I prepared it specifically for the moment you're standing in tonight, not as another catalog of signs to watch for, but as a working structure for becoming someone capable of actually receiving what you've already been sensing for years. It goes further than any single video could into how identity actually forms around contact like this, how it gets mistaken for imagination, and how it quietly negotiates with every strange moment before you're even consciously aware a reaction was chosen. This isn't a collection of proof to convince skeptics. It's the missing layer underneath everything you've already felt and never quite had language to trust fully. The link is waiting in the first pinned comment, the same place it's been since this conversation started tonight. What you've sensed for years, that quiet suspicion that something has been reaching toward you specifically, isn't something to keep filing away as imagination. It's already moving. The only real question left is whether you meet it from an identity built to actually hold it. There's a sensation worth naming before anything else here, because this next part isn't only conceptual. You'll feel it first as a subtle warmth, low in the belly, the kind that shows up right before something reorganizes rather than breaks apart. Let it sit there a moment before reaching for explanation. Everything discussed so far has stayed close to behavior and identity. What you do, what you've quietly decided is true about your own capacity to receive. There's a layer underneath even that, closer to how contact actually reaches you in the first place, before identity ever gets a chance to react to it at all. Call it a lens, not a belief system, not a personality trait. The actual shape through which this specific kind of connection gets filtered before it becomes something you can name clearly. Certain traditions describe this lens as tied to a particular star cluster, associated with the heart, with clarity, with a frequency some cultures have quietly honored for far longer than modern skepticism has existed to dismiss it. Set the mythology aside for a moment and look at the function underneath the name instead. Whatever you call it, its job is precise. It decides what gets through clearly, what arrives distorted, and what never lands at all because it doesn't match the shape already carved into your particular way of receiving. Here's why naming it matters practically tonight, not poetically. Vague language keeps vague confusion firmly in place. I feel something sometimes explains nothing and changes nothing about how you actually respond to it. My lens distorts anything that threatens my sense of what's rational before I'm even aware of receiving it. That's a mechanism. Mechanisms can be worked with directly. Vague feelings can only be endured indefinitely. Pause here for a moment. Feel your hands. Are they open, resting, or curled slightly, holding tension for a doubt that hasn't even fully arrived yet tonight. Release them deliberately, right now, and notice how much effort that actually required from you. That effort is the lens, mid-operation, doing exactly what it always does. Quietly, automatically, without asking your permission. First, everything named so far, the reflexive relabeling of strange sensations, the identity too small to hold what's actually being received, the deflection of your own perceptiveness as if it needed excusing. None of it was separate information. It was the same lens, showing up in different rooms of your attention, wearing different disguises each time, so it wouldn't be recognized as the same visitor returning again and again. This is where the whole approach quietly changes direction tonight. Most people, once they sense something real stirring, respond by trying to do more. More research, more meditation sessions, more effort thrown at forcing a connection that was never meant to be forced open in the first place. That instinct is understandable. It's also, in this specific case, almost always the wrong move. And here's the precise reason why it fails. You don't need more effort directed outward right now. You need less contradiction inside your own response to what's already arriving. Every moment of genuine openness, held while the lens still filters for doubt, creates two competing signals fighting inside the same narrow channel. And the lens, loyal to its oldest instructions, will side with the older signal nearly every single time it's given the chance to choose. Say that part again, slower, because it tends to undo years of anxious searching in a single sentence tonight. It's not about trying harder to receive. It's about no longer working against your own openness in the same breath you're trying to build it. Stop contradicting the receptivity you're asking for, and it finally has somewhere real to land instead of colliding with its own opposite the moment it arrives. Here's a question worth actually answering, not just letting pass by unexamined. In the last week, how many times did you feel a genuine flicker of connection, only to immediately undercut it with a thought like, "That's probably just my imagination working overtime again"? That second thought isn't neutral commentary. It's a direct instruction delivered to the exact same lens that just received the first, quieter signal only seconds earlier. This is where intensity gets mistaken for genuine progress, and the two deserve separating clearly tonight. Intensity is loud, dramatic meditation attempts, urgent searching for signs everywhere you look, emotional peaks that feel significant in the moment and exhaust you completely by evening. Stability is quiet. The same simple, uncontradicted openness, held day after unremarkable day without needing a dramatic sign to justify its presence. The lens doesn't respond to intensity nearly as strongly as most people assume it will. It responds to consistency, to a signal that shows up the same way whether you're actively searching or simply living an ordinary Tuesday. A quiet, stable openness held across months will outlast a loud, intense searching held across 3 excited days. Without exception whatsoever, if you've noticed yourself settling rather than straining through this particular section, that's not a small thing to overlook tonight. Not everyone stays present for the part where the language gets more precise, less dramatic, more like mechanics than mystery. If this is landing clearly for you, you're already standing somewhere different from where most viewers remain, still waiting for the next dramatic sign to finally convince them completely. Here's the part that tends to reframe everything discussed tonight, once it's actually understood at this level clearly. This contact was never simply something external to detect and wait for from a safe, skeptical distance. It's closer to a frequency held locally inside your own attention that the lens then reflects back to you as the specific quality your experience of connection ends up taking. That reframing changes what you actually do next, practically. Starting tonight rather than someday later, you stop scanning outward compulsively, hoping enough evidence will finally produce the certainty you're looking for. you start noticing where, right now, in this ordinary evening, you're contradicting the openness you claim to want. And you simply stop doing that, one contradiction at a time, without needing a dramatic sign to mark the shift clearly. This isn't for everyone listening tonight, and that deserves saying plainly instead of softened for comfort. Most people will hear this and find it interesting, then return tomorrow to the same anxious searching, unchanged, because actually holding a steady lens costs more than simply understanding the concept intellectually ever will. Understanding is the easy part. Living from receptivity is the part almost nobody follows all the way through. That's where the next layer opens, not into more explanation of the lens itself, but into what it actually costs you. Specifically, every time you let doubt run the show instead of catching it early before it settles into something harder to name and even harder to undo later. The cost of letting doubt run the show doesn't announce itself in a single dramatic evening. It accumulates the way dust settles on a windowsill, unnoticed until the moment you finally run your finger across it and feel how much has gathered there. A week of quietly dismissing small moments doesn't feel unusual while you're inside it. A decade of the same habit starts to feel like personality, like simply who you turned out to be around this subject. This is worth naming plainly, because vague spiritual language tends to soften exactly what should stay sharp here tonight. Contradiction has a price, and the price is years, the specific, unrepeatable kind, spent waiting for proof convincing enough to finally let in what you've already sensed correctly for a very long time. That isn't guilt. It's arithmetic. And arithmetic deserves honesty more than comfort right now. Think about someone you've known who says constantly that they're completely open to this kind of contact, that they'd welcome it without hesitation if it ever actually happened to them directly. And yet, somehow, every strange coincidence in their own life gets explained away within minutes. Every vivid dream gets attributed instantly to something they ate. From outside, the pattern is obvious within the first few sentences. From inside, it feels like each moment is simply coincidence, nothing more. You've probably been that person yourself, in some corner of your own experience with all of this. Maybe not dreams specifically, maybe déjà vu, maybe a persistent feeling of being watched with something other than fear attached to it. The specific experience matters less than the shape, and the shape stays consistent. A stated openness, running directly against an unspoken dismissal, with the dismissal quietly winning nearly every single time it's actually tested. Here's what genuine openness actually means here, once you strip away the aesthetic language surrounding it. It isn't a constant dramatic anticipation of contact happening any minute now, and it isn't pretending every strange feeling must mean something enormous immediately. Openness is simpler and less glamorous than that. It's the absence of active contradiction between the receptivity you claim and the automatic dismissal you keep running in the background of an ordinary evening like this one. You don't need to feel electrified constantly to be genuinely open. You need to stop actively arguing against the moments you say you welcome, in the small, unnoticed instances that never make it into the story you tell others about yourself. That's a lower bar than most spiritual content suggests, and it's also a far more honest one you can actually meet repeatedly without needing a dramatic encounter to sustain your belief in it. Pause for a moment here and notice your face. Is your expression soft, open, or slightly guarded, as if bracing against something that hasn't even arrived yet tonight? Soften it deliberately, and notice how unfamiliar that softening feels if you've been braced for a long stretch without fully realizing it was happening. Here's a consequence rarely discussed openly, because it's uncomfortable in a way most content about this subject tends to avoid entirely. Every year spent in contradiction doesn't just delay recognition. It reinforces the belief that recognition was never really available to someone like you in the first place. the delay becomes its own evidence, feeding back into the dismissal that caused it, tightening the loop instead of loosening it gradually over time. That's the part worth sitting with, honestly, without flinching away too quickly tonight. It isn't only that nothing seemed to happen, it's that the nothing itself became proof. In your own mind, that connection was never really meant for you specifically. And that proof gets cited every time something real shows up looking slightly too gentle to trust fully. If you're still here, past the point where comfort usually ends and honesty usually starts costing something real, that isn't coincidence, and it never has been tonight. Something in you decided, before this video even started playing, that it was finally time to stop managing the doubt and start actually examining what sits underneath it. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from managing contradiction instead of resolving it fully. You felt it. The tiredness that has nothing to do with how much sleep you got, the kind that shows up after a day when nothing physically demanding even happened around you at all. That's not overthinking. That's the cost of holding two opposing signals steady at once, hour after hour, without ever letting either one fully speak clearly. Most people misdiagnose that exhaustion as simply being a skeptical person by nature, as if temperament alone explained the whole pattern fully. That diagnosis is comforting, and it's also almost always incomplete tonight. The exhaustion isn't from being naturally skeptical. It's from claiming openness while simultaneously rehearsing dismissal in 100 small, unexamined moments across a single ordinary day. Here's where the body enters this conversation directly, because none of this stays purely mental for very long once it settles in fully. Contradiction held long enough doesn't just tire the mind, it settles into the throat, the space between the shoulder blades, the palms, the places where openness has nowhere left to go once the mind stops metabolizing the tension consciously. This is not for everyone listening tonight, and that needs saying plainly instead of softened for comfort right now. Most people will hear this and quietly find it interesting, then return tomorrow to the exact same dismissal, unchanged, because actually resolving it costs something intellectual. Understanding alone never demands of you. Understanding is the inexpensive part. Living differently is the part almost nobody follows all the way through completely. If something in you just resisted that sentence slightly, good. That resistance means it landed somewhere real, not somewhere abstract and easy to nod past from a safe emotional distance tonight while listening. Here's the new layer worth adding to everything already said so far. Alignment with this kind of contact isn't a single decision made once and maintained automatically afterward without effort. It's closer to a practice, repeated in small, unremarkable moments, mostly invisible to anyone watching your life from the outside completely. Nobody applauds you for noticing a dismissive thought and quietly choosing not to feed it further tonight. Consider what changes specifically once contradiction stops being your default response to something unexplainable happening. Recognition stops requiring so much internal debate because there's no longer a second skeptical voice arguing against the quieter one in real time constantly. Strange moments stop feeling like they require immediate explanation because the explaining itself was often just compensation for an openness that wasn't stable enough to hold steadily on its own. This is where urgency finally deserves to enter the conversation honestly, without manipulation attached to it in any way. Not urgency borrowed from a countdown or some limited window closing somewhere far away from you. Real urgency, the kind that comes from doing simple math about how many more years you're willing to spend financing the same dismissal before finally addressing what's actually underneath it. That math is yours to do, quietly, tonight, away from this video entirely and on your own terms. Nobody else can do it for you, and no single video, however clear, can walk you through resolving years of rehearsed doubt in the space of 20 minutes total. What it can do What this conversation has been doing since the very first question tonight is make the pattern visible enough that pretending not to see it finally stops feeling honest to you. There's a specific kind of relief that arrives once contradiction gets named clearly instead of vaguely sensed underneath everything else happening. It's not celebration. It's quieter than that. Closer to finally setting down something heavy. You'd forgotten you were even still carrying through every dismissed moment this year. That relief is where the next part actually begins. Not with more explanation of what's wrong, but with what it actually looks like to meet this specific contact differently, starting from wherever you happen to be standing right now, tonight, without waiting for more proof to arrive first. Meeting this contact differently doesn't start with a dramatic sign finally arriving to convince you completely. It starts smaller than that, quieter than that, almost too ordinary to register as the beginning of anything significant at all. You simply catch one dismissive thought, once, in real time, and choose not to feed it further. That's the entire mechanism. No proof required first. Let's gather what's actually been said tonight, not as a summary to skim past quickly, but as a shape worth seeing whole for the first time clearly. There was never only silence out there, waiting for enough evidence to finally break through convincingly. There was a lens, deciding long ago what counted as safe enough to receive. There was resistance dressed as caution. There was an identity too small to hold what's actually already arriving. And underneath all of it, one single mechanism, repeating itself in different disguises so it would never be recognized as the same pattern twice. Here's something worth feeling honestly before this closes tonight. None of this was ever really about waiting for something to arrive from somewhere impossibly far away, event by event, sign by sign. It was about attention, where it rests, what it's decided to call impossible, what it quietly stopped questioning long before tonight ever gave it real language. Change attention's relationship to what's already here, and the entire experience of contact reorganizes itself without needing anything external to prove itself first. You came into this video carrying a familiar suspicion that something has been reaching toward you specifically, and by now, that suspicion has a shape it didn't have an hour ago. It has a mechanism. It has a location. Not somewhere among distant stars, not only in strange moments waiting to be catalogued and studied later. It lives in the quiet architecture of what you've decided is possible for you to receive, and it has been running there, mostly unexamined, for longer than you've had words to name it clearly until tonight. Here's the part that tends to stay after everything else fades, so let it settle rather than rushing past it quickly. This was never about distance at all. It was about willingness, something older than any headline, still active, still asking something specific of everyone sensing it at once across the world. And what gets dismissed can, eventually, be met clearly, not through more proof, but through noticing, repeated calmly, without needing certainty to arrive first before you begin. That sentence isn't comforting in the soft way most closing lines try to be tonight. It's precise in a way that doesn't leave much room to look away afterward. And precision, once it lands, tends to stay lodged somewhere you can't easily dislodge it again later. You'll notice it tomorrow in some small moment when the next strange feeling tries to slip past, dismissed the way they always have before. That noticing is the actual work. Everything else was only ever preparation for that exact instant. At its core, this was never only about what's approaching from somewhere distant. It was about how you're already perceiving what's sitting right beside you tonight, long before the next sign arrives, to test whether anything inside you has genuinely changed. The link is waiting in the first pinned comment beneath this video, exactly where it's been since this conversation started tonight. I want to be honest with you about something before you close this tab and let the night carry you somewhere else entirely. Material like this rarely stays available for long. Not because of manufactured scarcity, but because what's written in those pages tends to unsettle narratives that plenty of people have a quiet interest in keeping exactly as they are. And knowledge like that has a long documented history of being pushed quietly out of view whenever it starts spreading too widely among people. Don't wait for a clearer sign to arrive before taking this seriously, because it won't arrive dressed any differently than the quiet feeling you've already had tonight. You didn't reach this exact sentence by accident, and some part of you has probably already sensed that, even if you haven't said it to yourself directly yet in words. Read with an open mind, without rushing toward the final page just to say you finished it completely. Let certain lines sit longer than you expect them to. And if something in there reaches a part of you that's been sensing this quietly for a long time now, leave one word in the comments below. Desperto. Not as performance, not for anyone else watching, just as a quiet signal that some part of you was ready for this long before tonight ever gave it a name.